The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production.
Episode 42. Why is that important? It's only 10 away from 52. Well done, Neil. You can count. Which we'll come to actually during the show, because there's something important we want to say about episode 52. It's the last. No, it's not. No, that's not what we were going to say. But I did want to draw your attention to something very, very important, and this is something that Gemma said to me during the Ex-Weddings conference. I can't remember why we got on the subject, but I wanted to ask if this was true or not. Okay, is it true, Mullins, that you have...
Where's this going?
on your YouTube channel, in your YouTube films, that you have worn makeup? I appreciate you weren't quite expecting that question, particularly right at the start of the show, and really on a show where we should be being far more charitable, because it is the first week of December. You know, we're on the Christmas run here.
It's all right to have 3 wives, right? People go higher than that.
Careful.
People go higher than 3. I have done, yes, in the past, because I like yes, basically is the answer, but not very often. And usually it's when I have to. Sometimes I have to. Like, I get up at really early these days, like 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Do you go to the office early? You do, because often I come down to my office. It's a darn sight closer than yours is to your place.
Yeah, I
you're on email before I am.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, it depends what's going on, but generally. So, but the most important thing, the point of that is that I was. I try and do the filming part of my filming.
Disclaimer.
First thing in the morning, and I remember once waking up and Gemma said, "You can't possibly look like that on the telly or on the internet." So she slapped a little bit of makeup on, whatever they call it. I don't know, confounder, is it? And confounder stuff.
Concealer.
Oh yeah, that's it. And
confounder.
And I need that now with my black eye that's still here.
Yeah.
So yes, I have, and I'm proud. Yes,
there's nothing wrong with it.
I'm a man that's proud to have worn makeup on the internet.
In my past, I've been on telly, and I've worn makeup applied by a proper makeup artist, not just Mullins' hand. So I've been there as well. You know,
the FujiCast.
Right. So, lots of revelations, obviously, today. Oh, and by the way, we're only a couple of weeks away from the big day itself. And we have got a very special episode coming up on the week that leads right up to the 25th. It's going to be our very own nativity play. And there's been a little bit of hilarity in planning this, so I want you to mark that in your diary, that as it gets towards Christmas, you don't have this kind of like, we give the podcast a miss a couple of weeks because I'm too busy Christmas shopping. You will not want to miss this particular episode. Right, so welcome to the FujiCast. The show thrives and falls to its knees in gratitude for your questions. So we've got some cracking questions this week, including, I'm afraid, actually, there's quite a serious subject, really. One of the questions this week is about what happens when kit is stolen. So that's one. Send your questions in, please, to click@fujicast.co.uk. Today we'll hear from the sharp end of photojournalism. He's been a guest on the Breathe Pictures podcast, latest episode, and today we're going to take an excerpt about what it's like to work on the kind of photojournalist missions that you can certainly describe as humanitarian commissions too. So there we go. A passing mention of the private Facebook group, and I've been terrible here. We normally sort of grab a Facebook post here, but it's not on the screen for some reason. So just make sure you go there and join it. Right, let's crack straight on with the questions, because we had quite a long start with Kev's revelations about makeup. Go on, you can go first.
Hang on, I'm still putting my tights on. Hang on. Yeah, right.
Well, it's panto season.
There we go.
You can wear tights panto season.
Right.
Americans don't actually know much about panto, do they? So if you're across the pond, you'd be thinking, what on earth are they talking about? Yeah. It's a show where practically anything goes. The women are men, the men are women.
There's horses which have 4 legs that are made of people.
Yeah. What else happens? You might think, what? Does Britain go?
It's behind you.
Yes. Oh no, you don't. You might be thinking, does Britain go to the pub for a month? Well, practically, yes, it does. Actually,
I think we should carry it. Otherwise, we're going to lose listeners. Right, Jason Angelini. Greetings from across the pond.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to know what a panto is. No, that's not what he says.
Funny you should ask.
I wanted to recommend a great documentary on Amazon Prime entitled Get the Picture. Now, I just read this and I have not watched this, so this sounds very good. So Amazon Prime, and we are now trying to put more content on the website, so you'll see all of this detail below the episode. The award-winning documentary recounts the remarkable life of John G. Morris, the revered Life magazine photojournalist who was involved in the D-Day Normandy landings. Get the Picture provides a distinct insight into the power of one man's passion for photography. Yeah. So that's good. Get the Picture from Amazon Prime. Okay. However, we'll probably find out it's not available in the UK. So, but we'll look for it. On a different note, I'm curious if you have experienced any downturns in inquiries in recent years. Okay. So he goes on to say, I have been at this full-time professionally for 16 years now, and at one time we were shooting about 60 to 70 weddings a year, which wasn't bad at all. Relying on client referrals and venues with no sign of slowing down.
No. ...
until it did.
Oh.
I love weddings and would love to get back to a higher number, maybe 30 or so a year, but I'm at a loss. Curious if you have taken any other approaches or have any grand ideas or reasons why this is happening. We have taken on other areas of photography, families and real estate, but have a great love of weddings and hope to gain more traction in that area again. Great podcast as always. I look forward to listening to your conversations and interviews every week. Jason, Angelini,
Jason.
Downturns.
Well, we mentioned this at the X-Weddings conference a good couple of weeks ago, and I think it was actually Jason's email that sparked me mentioning it during the Q&A, that it's not just, I don't want to mention the B word, but a lot of people have been thinking it was the B word. Don't drop the B word, but clearly it's not. Maybe it's global patterns in how people are changing the way that they hire wedding photographers and whether they believe it's... You actually have a very good theory about this.
Well, I think firstly, we have to be brutally honest, and I'm not one for, I hate... I hopefully everybody is successful and carries on to be successful and everything, but I hate all of the fake success. My business is great, I'm shooting 120 weddings a year, and actually they're shooting 6.
And then you find out that they're shooting it for 300 quid.
Yeah, exactly. So, brutal fact is that, yes, inquiries for me certainly, and I believe for you also, are...
They are down.
Right down.
Yep.
Now...
We're nothing if not honest on this show.
Absolutely. So, send your checks to us, Neil and Kevin.
We'll cash them in. Yeah.
So, honestly, I don't think it's a US thing and a UK thing. Many of the people I've spoken to in the industry are feeling it a little bit. Yeah. The B word, perhaps. Brexit maybe is having an impact, certainly for people who work for European companies. Maybe they're thinking, they may have been told by their European employers that actually we don't know until it happens what happens. So maybe that's going on. But I think generally, it's a generational thing. Personally.
Yeah, this is your theory, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the people that are getting married now, typically the people that are getting married now have grown up with technology. They've grown up with Instagram. They've grown up with the ease of access to software, to cameras and the cheapness of cameras. And they almost certainly know somebody who is perhaps a full-time photographer, a part-time photographer, a very good photographer, somebody who's got all of the gear because the gear is now very cheap and all the cameras do a million things at once. So I personally think that's having an impact on it. Now, I'm not saying that we are we're going to struggle and all that kind of stuff, but I think that the demographic, if you like, of the people getting married these days has changed generally, and I'm
doing a lot more mature weddings, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, I always have. It was always rare for me to shoot like a 22-year-old something's wedding. Yeah, because they typically aren't attracted to my style of photography.
I thought you were going to say they're typically not attracted to a Mullins.
With a black eye wandering around their wedding.
Around the wedding. I got it from judo, honest.
Honest, Gov. So, I typically, my kind of typical client has often been second marriage, a bit older and stuff. And, and that's just the way kind of the aesthetics of my pictures, I suppose, go towards those. But it's, I honestly think it's something to do with that. I think it's, the Instagram world we live in and the filters and the fake happiness of the internet and all of that kind of stuff is, and I'm not saying the internet is like fake happiness, but the ever evolving, look at my world, it's so good kind of thing. And I think that that's what I think. That's genuinely what I think. Also, the venues are struggling, the laws are changing. So in
they are in the UK.
Within a while, you'll be able to get married anywhere. So the venues are struggling, and to counter that, the venues are encouraging, or some venues certainly are encouraging the clients to save money by you don't need a photographer. Everybody brings mobile phones these days, and that's happening. I know that's happening because I've spoke to people. So the laws are changing, everything's changing, and which means that you have to change too. Simple as that.
I also think stylistically there are things that you can change within your business, perhaps.
Yeah.
If you haven't thought about turning on that video button, you might be thinking, oh no, please no, I don't want to be a videographer. I'm not talking about doing wedding videos or wedding photography, although I have now entered that realm because I believe that's going to support the wedding side of my business, and actually filming is something I genuinely enjoy anyway. What about hybrid? Offering something that that friend Dave can't do, because that's the issue. I think sometimes a friendly Dave will turn up and he'll say, I'll do your pictures, no worries at all. Then he'll get absolutely plastered later on, and you'll miss lots of it for sure. I know that's an age-old argument. But equally, Dave is probably not going to turn on the video button and know how to grade a piece of video and record some sound from the speeches where Dad's making this gorgeous speech about his daughter. I mean, I think if you start to adapt your business and realise we live in certainly a multifaceted world when it comes to how people now consume pictures, because you only go on the London Underground and all those billboards, the vertical billboards that are now electronic and moving images.
Yeah. But the thing, that was like 600 years ago. They had that at Harry Potter. That's old
that's
tech.
Nothing new. Yeah.
And the moving stairways. The Underground copied everything off Harry Potter.
Yeah. If you come to London, by the way, this is for our American friends. Now the staircases in some of the undergrounds do actually move.
Do they?
Yeah.
What, not like just normal escalators?
No. Shh, no.
Oh, not seen that before.
Right, Terrell Woods from Malibu. We're starting with a lot of our American friends this week. And we did mention you last week, Terrell, so I thought we should start off straight away with yours. Thank you guys for a wonderful podcast. I've been a Canon shooter for the last 6 or 7 years when I decided to play around with the emerging mirrorless stuff. First of all, the MFT kits, Panasonic, Olympus, all very nice, but low light struggles. Then to the APS-C kits, I really wanted Canon to shine. In fact, their M50, very nice camera, but everyone told me, try Fuji. So other than Canon, to me, these feel the best in hand. XT2, and XH1. But holy baloney, Batman, was there a learning curve, and frustratingly so. I shoot sports, and I just kept saying to anybody who'd listen, this stuff just isn't going to cut it. So wrong. Listening to your podcast and contacting actual Fuji sports shooters, the work has been spot on and a joy to use. You've not used Fuji for any sport because you
I have, yeah. So originally, when I used
to shoot a lot with your Canon, didn't you?
When I did the rugby, I shot with my Canons. I mean, that has been. Well, I think the last time I did it was 9 years ago or something, maybe even 10. But yeah, so I did that, and at least twice a year, I do some work for the Great Run Company.
Oh yes, you do. Yeah.
So the Bristol Half Marathon, the Bristol 10K, all that kind of stuff. And so I shoot all of that, and technically my role there is the kind of behind the scenes storytelling, the emotion, the tears, the people being sick, all that kind of stuff. But it also involves me capturing the people tearing over the finish line. So rather than just a portrait, they have the official kind of Runner's World magazine photographers there, and who do a great job. But my when they're crossing the line, I'm looking for that instant that they are, that kind of moment of belief that they've done it. So I use the Fuji system.
You may not be using what Terrell is using then, because he's using a 100 to 400, 50 to 150, 50 to 140, sorry.
That's why.
And then the 1024 for video. Oh, you've got a 50 to 140.
50 to 140.
Yeah,
that's
I
why
apologise.
Yeah.
But he says, which two primes would you recommend? I borrowed the 56, nice, but I'm still waiting for it to focus, a bit like the old Canon 85 1.2. So I guess he's looking for the longer end range.
Don't use the 56 for sport. No, it's not for sport.
No,
it's a brilliant lens, but not for sport.
But I wonder if he's using the APD version, which is even a little bit more sluggish, isn't it?
Possibly, but it's not a sports.
Any primes that you would suggest?
No, I would just use zooms.
Would you?
Honestly, for sports stuff, yeah, because you don't need that extra depth of field, necessarily. Mostly, they want a little bit of storytelling depth behind it, so you don't really need to be going more than 2.8. The zoom's going to give you everything you need in terms of capacity to move around, the frame at least. Why do you need to worry about flipping lenses and things like that? Honestly, when I do my running stuff, I use the 1024 and the 50 to 140. That's it.
100 to 400. Have you used that one?
I don't have that lens. No. I think isn't that the f4 to f5.6?
I think it is. Yeah.
No, I mean I would go for the fast primes, but
5140.
Well, yeah. Although there is the 200mm, which is the f2.8 prime, I think, or f2 prime even maybe. Yeah. It's huge and it's white. Yeah. And it's very, very expensive.
Very expensive, yeah.
But if you're serious about it,
and if you don't mind selling your children and everything else that goes with it,
that's what the serious sports photographers will be using. The ones that are shooting Fujifilm for sure.
Do you see any Fujifilm shooters at Stadia these days? Have you seen a few?
I've seen a couple of those. They're very easy to tell because they've got the green rim around the edges. Yeah. I have seen a couple when I've been watching some sports recently. Not a huge amount. I mean, it's still predominantly Nikon and Canon.
I go to Reading FC occasionally because that's our biggest local football club, and you really do have to sell the family silver if you want to go into London to watch football these days. But I do always look. I think I wonder if I see a Fuji shooter down there.
Well, interestingly, I'm actually accredited to the Welsh Rugby Union as a photographer, so I've just never had the on the times that I have applied for. I'm basically pre-accredited, but you still have to apply for each game, and they've never kind of had space. So I haven't applied for a long time, but maybe I'll think about it again. I'd love to do it.
Right, your question.
Quite an interesting question from Leon Lewis, and
not the pop star.
Leon, I think.
No, Leona Lewis.
Leona Lewis.
Oh, sorry.
Leona Lewis.
Sorry.
I have a story about her.
Is she in the hit parade?
Is she?
During the war.
Is she in the hit parade? I've started listening to the podcast 4 weeks ago and loving it. I've been listening from the start of the day at 5:30 a.m. while I walk to work to lose weight.
That's a great concept.
Well done. This might have been answered in future episodes.
Or previous ones, do you mean?
No, because he's only 4 weeks in.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that confused me as well.
This is all a bit time travel, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to rephrase it slightly. This may already have been answered, or maybe you answered it in an episode I haven't listened to yet.
It's due to come.
But when your kids get married, who would you love to come and take the pictures, as you will both be on other duties and you can't pick each other? But then you might not want to, he says.
Would you pick a wedding photographer, or would you pick a photographer that you particularly admire?
Well, this did cross my mind. If this was a like no barriers type thing, would you go really left field, or let's assume, right?
Is it Cloud Cuckoo Land choices?
No, I'm going to rein it in.
Reasonably realistic.
I'm going to rein it in. Let's assume that the year is 20... what is it now? 2020 nearly. Yeah. So let's assume the year is 2032 and Jack and Rosa are marrying each other.
All right, I thought... Okay, all right.
And now Rosa listens to this in the back of the car. She's going to be absolutely mortified. And probably Jack also. And you and I...
Jack does listen sometimes.
You and I...
When he's not watching PewDiePie videos.
We have to chip in to pay for the photographer.
Yeah, £5.50, there we go.
But we...
God, how much will wedding photography cost? £5,000.
Well, will there be wedding photography then?
Oh, that's true.
But okay, so let's assume that we have to go with something that's within like our type of package price. So because you dropped me in it with the makeup, I'm going to ask you to pick the photographer for the wedding.
Oh, you're not going to answer this question?
No, because we're sharing it, so you can pick. I'm gonna pay for the wine.
Okay, and the beer. Oh dear. Well now. If it was a wedding photographer, I'm going to choose between two people. Is that allowed? Or maybe they could both come.
Well,
we got loads of budget.
This is already getting very complicated.
Knock back a bit of the wine budget.
No, I'm buying the wine.
All right. Well, I thought you might be able to chip in. This is where the arguments are going to start, isn't it?
No way. I already told Rosa that Jack's dad was bad.
Alistair Freeman would obviously be on my list because, and there's a very good reason for that, because we're all in a collective, and it makes perfect sense to me. that I would want somebody that we trust enough to, pass business back and forth between each other. He'd definitely be in there if we could afford him.
Yep. Think we can afford him?
Yeah. And there is another. I like Paul Rogers. I like his work an awful lot. But if I was going a bit left field, I'd possibly choose my friend Giles to come and do a bit of documentary work.
Ooh, no, Giles has done weddings before, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. And he does listen to this podcast, so I'm going to be very, very careful now. But he doesn't necessarily enjoy them quite as much as he used to.
I remember a very drunken conversation with him in London one night, and I think pretty much it was fill the gaps between the F words.
Yeah, I can almost see it. Giles, will you shoot Jack and Rosa's wedding? What the? Yeah, I think that'll be the reaction. Might have to stick with Alistair and Paul.
Yeah, that'd be cool, though. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you totally there. Although I suppose it does come down. We're making that. We're doing what proper dads do. We're deciding on behalf of our kids.
Yeah.
Actually, they may want something very much more formal. So let's just assume they're going for a traditional wedding photographer.
Right.
I think I'd drag Sanjay out of his luxury pad in London.
Oh, Sanjay! I can't believe I forgot that. Yes,
he could come up in his Maserati.
I wouldn't be able to afford him by then. He'd be just.
But he'd do it for mates rates, wouldn't he?
Well, yeah. But mates rates would be at least 10 grand.
Yes, so I think Sanjay for the more cinematic, beautiful.
Yeah.
Although he does do very good documentary stuff as well too.
He does, yeah.
T's and C's apply.
So we've got 3 photographers now. This is going to cost an absolute fortune.
Yeah.
How much money
you're paying for the photographers. I said that. I'm doing the wine.
Hang on a minute.
I'm getting it from Aldi.
Oh, then in that case, then I'm definitely not paying for the entire photography. That doesn't seem fair to me.
I'm not coming then. That's it.
That's it. Wedding over.
Yeah.
Is it my question or yours?
Yours.
All right. What have we got here on the clock? I'll try and choose a shorty. Here we go. Matt Latham, thank you for the podcast. It keeps me sane on a Monday morning, does it? Photography and videography is a hobby of mine, which landed me being asked to film a wedding I was attending. Sorry, there's 2 wedding questions here, but it's not supposed to be about weddings entirely. In fact, it's very much not about weddings in about 5 minutes' time. As this is a hobby, I did it for free, and the newly married couple loved what I produced for them, which got me thinking, I'd like to maybe start testing the water to do this professionally. You probably are not listening to the right episode when we started off with the state of the wedding industry.
You need to wear makeup and you need to be prepared.
Using the XT3, filming in 4K 10-bit 200 megabit file, there's a lot of large files. So here's the question. And I suppose actually this does work for any kind of photography, as file sizes are getting larger continually. How long do you both keep the client photos on your systems, chaps? Do you both keep all your photos indefinitely, or do you delete them eventually after a certain period of time? And I guess the same really would go for video. So, how long do you keep the raw materials, whether that's JPEG or RAW files, or these huge, lovely, big movie files that you can now turn out of your XT3s?
So I actually spent a whole day a couple of weeks back reorganising all my drives and my archiving system and everything like that, and I think I've got a good system now. But it's essentially, to get straight to the point there, I keep the memory cards are not used until the wedding is edited and delivered. So first of all, the memory cards from the shoot sit in a little cupboard, and they just sit there until that wedding is edited.
You must have a stack of those then.
I do have quite a few, yeah. The actual raw files, obviously, when I get back to the studio, I'll put on 2 different drives. And also what I do at that point is I will, if I haven't shot JPEGs, but I will use Photo Mechanic to kick out loads of JPEGs from the raw files, and I just dump those as a zip file into Dropbox. So I'm covered backup wise. And then those, though, once the wedding is edited, the files that I've kept, the raw files that have made the cut, once everything is done and dusted, albums delivered, all that kind of stuff, that all gets zipped up as one big collection. So the raw files that were kept, the Lightroom catalogue, any albums, any photo films, all that kind of stuff, zipped up into one thing, stuck on a drive and archived.
So you keep every single raw file you've ever shot?
No. Only the ones that were edited. So the ones that didn't make the cut,
right, they're gone.
But they get gotted.
They get what?
They get gotted.
Gotted.
They get gots. They get gotted after at the end of the year. So they still sit on that drive until the end.
For a year they'll be there, and then they're gone.
the end of the following year.
End of the following year.
This is my new system. Yeah. So, for example, wedding that I'm going to shoot tomorrow is that I'll keep those raw files until the end of 2020.
Right. Okay.
And then they're gone.
Right. That's a lot longer than I keep them for. Although, actually, since I've been using Google Drive, then I have to say I've not had a purge for a long, long time. So all those raw files are still up there, actually.
You put your raw files in the cloud?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long does that take to upload?
Not long. I've got a pretty. Virgin. Here's an advert. Ding, doo, 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 Virgin. Is what I use, and it's super, super quick.
So, do you have unlimited storage with Google Cloud? Wow, I didn't know that you could do that.
Yeah, you can.
How much does that cost?
Commercial. I think I pay about because of the various businesses and things I have, and the different accounts I have. I pay about £65 a month.
Wow.
I don't. You might think what, but actually, I see that as fuel. The fuel in my car is a.
Well, I think that's very reasonable if you can get all your raw files and stuff up there.
Yeah.
I mean, I use Dropbox for absolutely everything apart from raw files.
Right.
So my entire business is in my Dropbox account.
I couldn't do it with the Dropbox. It's hugely expensive for the same sort of thing. I think.
Absolutely. I do the. I think I've got the 3 terabyte plan. So that's perfectly enough for me.
Yeah, I've got a business suite account.
Yeah.
And I'm prepared to pay a bit more handsomely for that.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't know. Is there a fair usage policy? I don't think there is. I've certainly, I don't. I mean, I'm not taking liberties.
No. Well, I didn't know they did that. That's good. I'm going to look into that. I shall link to the Google Business Suite in my new section underneath all of the episodes on the podcast.
There was a Google advert and a Virgin advert, and nobody got paid a bean for it, eh? Honestly, we should be raking it in, but we just aren't. Anyway, we'll return to your questions in a little while. I'm going to try and tone it right down. Sometimes when we go into the interviews, we have to tone it right back.
Yeah.
This is the second part, really, of I suppose your introduction to an extraordinary photographer who I feel really privileged to have met on a couple of occasions. I worked in the Gambia last year on some political documentaries. Jason Florio. I know before you heard the 9/11 story. Do you remember the 9/11 story that he told the day that the towers fell? And he was in the city and he recorded that story photographically that day. And really, for today's interview to make sense, I should furnish you with a little backstory and African history, perhaps. So, during my time with him when we met up, he shared more stories beyond the Twin Towers, extended stories about his photographic work in Africa, and in particular, we chatted for a quarter of an hour or so about his work with MOAS, short for Migrant Offshore Aid Station. Now, to quote from their website, their mission, no one should have to risk their life to reach safety. That's why MOAS provides aid and assistance to the world's most vulnerable migrant communities. Now, Jason is based between Malta, the Gambia and the UK, and in 2015 and 16, when this story is most pertinent, most of his time was being spent in the Gambia, which at that time was under an oppressive dictatorial regime led by a leader who had simply stripped the country of its assets and ruled with a firm cruelty. Those who resisted were locked up and many simply just disappeared. But at that time, there were many other Gambians disappearing. Many young Gambians fleeing the country, not because they'd been taken in by state security, but because they were taking what's referred to as the back way to the Libyan coast. A 2,500-mile journey to buy space aboard overcrowded, dangerous sea-going vessels to make a perilous journey across the sea to Italy and other countries in Europe. And even if they managed to get anywhere near a boat at the other end, some were being taken by shameless smugglers who'd refused to let them board unless families back home paid some kind of voyage ransom. You could get that far only to find you had no more money to pay any form of ransom and end up being enslaved, a trade which I'm sure in this century you'd felt had all but been wiped out. I also feel sure that the thousands of tourists passing through the Gambia to go take their place on sun lounges at 4- and 5-star luxury hotels had no idea that just yards outside their gates and compounds, this small West African country was a source location for many trying to escape poverty and heartless leadership. So today's interview is not so much about photography, but what happens when a photographer finds, as he describes it, his two worlds colliding. It's a human story about a humanitarian photographer. It's about a British, Gambian-based photographer who finds himself on a boat in the middle of the Med, photographing and trying to help bring awareness to a growing migration issue and the cruelty of sending people across the sea in small boats, underfueled, ill-equipped to sail, with sometimes hundreds of migrants, many actually not able to actually swim. Jason Florio was about to find out that those he was photographing and those he sometimes helped physically to pull from the clutches of a cold Mediterranean and Aegean Sea were people he actually knew.
Yeah, I was living in Gambia I left New York and I was living in Gambia between 2013 and 2015, working from here, doing assignments around not just West Africa, but further afield. And I got a call one day from a friend of mine, actually, I was in Mogadishu with, and he said, like, I'm working for this NGO that's based out of Malta, first private rescue ship that's going to be working in the Mediterranean, mainly off the coast of Libya. Can you come and you want to spend a few weeks? We'll pay you to shoot some pictures for us. So I think the biggest amount of time I'd spent on a boat was probably taking the cross-channel ferry, I think. So the idea of being on a boat for 3 weeks was quite intimidating. But anyway, I got on this boat and we headed down to Libya from Malta. And literally the first day we did a rescue, and I met a Gambian girl who was from Barra, which is at from Basse, who is at the far end of the country. And I remember it was a late night rescue. It was the first night rescue I'd been on. It was the first day I was there, so it was the first night rescue I'd been on. Very, very dangerous rescue. And these women were covered in fuel and completely exhausted, and we had to transfer them to a big container ship. We couldn't get them onto our boat because we were already filled with a previous boat of migrants and refugees. She had this immense climb up this pilot's ladder, and before I went, I said, "Look, give me your name, give me your phone number." And I just held the camera up in the half darkness, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is like I could know her family." And so Africa suddenly was I was in the middle of the sea, but I was meeting, I don't want to say fellow Gambians, but people I was very, very close to. Over the following weeks, I met more and more Gambians. Gambia, it's the smallest mainland country in Africa, smallest country in the mainland of Africa, but it was per capita one of the biggest source countries for migrants. And it was sort of starting to get surreal, as I was meeting people, I was chatting about, oh yeah, Brick Army, that cafe, this place and that place. And I think it was about the third rescue, there was a young boy I got talking to, and within a very short period of time, I realized I knew his dad, who worked for my friend Lawrence, who'd set up this lodge that brought me to the Gambia in the very first place. And I'd photographed his dad as part of my portrait series with these 8x10 camera, and I was like, I just couldn't believe it. It was one thing sort of talking about places, but then actually meeting people you were one degree of separation from. And then it happened multiple times. The nephew of my Gambian doctor was on the boat one time, and the very last one was sort of quite extraordinary. We had 2 rescue boats out at one point, and we knew this was probably going to be our very last mission. There was a lot of reasons why the organisation wasn't going to be able to continue. So it was quite sort of sad for all of us. We'd all got, I'd been out there for about 18 months, backwards and forwards, and I'd got really emotionally attached to all the crew members and what we were doing. Whether people believed in you should be saving migrants at sea, or were we a ferry service, were we aiding and abetting the smugglers, etc. It didn't really matter. There was this intense meeting of humanity, this sort of sense of extraordinary moment when people are in such a distressed situation, and you can be there to help them. I mean, I'm there to document it, but I felt it was also my job to try and kind of ease that passage. I can speak a bit of Mandinka, one of the local languages, and they really love that this, oh wow, it's like, us, who we are, where we're coming from. So that was quite special. So cut a long story short, this whole group of Gambians were on one of the rescue boats, and we were told we were going to transfer them to our boat. And for some reason, I just got talking to this one Gambian boy. I don't know why I picked him out the whole crowd, and I just asked him which village he was from, and he said, I'm from Kudang, which is a village quite a way up country. And I said, oh, do you know Sambelkunda, which is even a tinier village where a friend of mine has an organization to train vets. And he said, well, do you know Lang Baba Cisse? And I said, Lang Baba Cisse works for Gambia Horse and Donkey Trust. And he said, yeah, that's my dad. I'm like, I see your dad about 3 or 4 times a week when I'm here in the Gambia, because he comes to our house all the time. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was just shocking. I mean, literally, suddenly he got whisked off to be put on our boat, and then I sort of caught up with him on our boat, and I was about to spend the next sort of 48 hours chatting with him on and off, and I was able to call his dad from the ship to let him know that his son was fine, and we were both in tears. It was just...
Whose idea was it to actually place you on the boats rather than watching it from your rescue boat? You started putting yourself amongst the rescuees.
I think about two weeks into my first mission, I realized I was starting to, the pictures were starting to feel a little repetitive, which sounds ridiculous. You got this sort of insane situations that are happening, but it did after a while feel a little repetitive, because I was often from the position of working from what we call the rib, which is this sort of it's about a 6 meter dinghy, which we would use as a way to ferry the migrants between their boats and the rescue ship, because it was too dangerous to bring the migrant boats right next to our boat, because people would panic. It has to be done in a very sort of organized way. And I remember stepping down onto the rib going, okay, I'm going to kind of end up kind of with the same pictures. And Chris Catrambone, who's the founder of the organization, he said, I'm going to put you on that boat. And we had it was one of the biggest boats that we had in that 2-week period. It had about 600 people on it. A huge old fishing boat, and the thing was packed. So we'd sort of pull up, and there were some Syrian guys on the back, and one of them could speak English, and Chris said, I'm putting my guy on that boat, make sure he's safe. So I sort of went, okay, I'll jump up there, I'll take a few pictures, the rib will go round once and I'll get back off. Well, he didn't tell me, but he wanted me to sort of remain on the boat, and just get a number of how many people were on there, etc., and also to help me get another perspective on the situation. And I'd been dreaming about the idea of getting on the boats, but I didn't really want to push it. The boats can be really unstable. Many of them would tip over. It's very, very dangerous. But once I got on the boat, then I could start talking to people. I realized that not just the hundreds of people on the deck, the hold itself was completely and utterly jam-packed. You couldn't squeeze another human being down there. It was this dark hold, fetid air, fumes coming up. Obviously the smell of human beings had been down there for a long time. But from that point on, I was pushing every time to get on the boats. I said, oh, okay, next one, I want to get under the deck.
Did it ever occur to you that some of the smugglers would be aboard these boats as well, perhaps?
We'd sort of got enough intelligence that probably there wouldn't be smugglers on there, because there wouldn't really be any reason for them to be there as such, unless they themselves were trying to get to Europe, and probably they were all making way too much money to want to give that up. So, I mean, there were fears that, were there, nefarious elements on there? Could there have been, kind of people escaping the war in Libya? There are ISIS or Al Qaeda or whoever else was maybe trying to sneak out of there. Those were sort of definite considerations. But most of the time I realized that just human beings trying to escape very bad situations. Whether it's they're economic migrants, whether they're coming out of places like Somalia or South Sudan. They were just regular people in a really, really bad situation, and the crew realized putting me on the boat as well was actually kind of beneficial, because not only was I remaining in radio contact, so I could sort of pick out if there was any particularly bad medical cases that people need to be evacuated more quickly than the other people. So my job went not just from being a photographer and a documentarian, but also to be sort of a liaison as such, and try and be more fitting with the crew. At first, when I was on the ship, the crew were great with me, but I was still I was an outsider. I was, the guy that got in the way all the time.
But yeah, that's fascinating, because and that leads straight into a question I was going to ask you, which I think you've answered now. I interviewed for the podcast a photographer called Cameron Neville in Australia, who is a firefighting photojournalist, or we're not quite sure actually whether he's a photojournalist that fights fires or a firefighter that is a photojournalist, because it's become, the two areas have fused really. And I was watching the film Fishers of Men, and I was watching children coming off or out of the sea who were the same age as my children, and I was wondering how you react to that, whether you're able to stand back with your camera or whether you feel you should get involved and be part of the rescue team.
Yeah, I was very kind of aware that what I was doing was, was definitely important, because the organization needs to have the pictures and the imagery to be able to keep funding themselves. People need to see the realities of what's happening out there. But there were points when I did have to put the camera down, because it was about pitching in. And we had I think the worst incident I was ever involved in was actually when we'd moved one of the ships to the Aegean Sea. So we were working between Turkey and Greece. Normally the rescues were happening at night. The channel of water between Turkey and the small island of Agathonisi was could be really turbulent. I mean, the wind would change, and a lot of these migrants, mainly Syrians and Yazidis, were really caught unawares. And we had a situation one night, which was actually it was one of those strange, calm nights, very dark night. And the boat had been spotted on the radar moving very, very fast. We figured it's probably a smuggler boat. In that section, the smugglers were on the boats in a number of cases, because they didn't want to lose the boat. So they would pack it with X number of people. They would go at high speed and drop them on this very small island, turn the boat and go back to Turkey undetected. So we figured, okay, that's what's going to happen. We'd witnessed that before. We'd seen it with the night vision, people getting dropped. Migrants go up onto the rocks, and then a team from Médecins Sans Frontières, who is based on the island, would collect them. Well, this incident, the mark on the radar, the boat was going very fast, and it stopped really abruptly, not too far from the rocks. So we got in our, it's called a daughter craft. I forgot the name of it now, but anyway, it's a very fast boat which we would use to go and sort of meet the migrants as such, and we got out there, and it was pitch darkness. We were moving the light, couldn't see anything, and then we could start hearing these voices, people shouting help, in Arabic, just lots of, and we're like, oh my god, where's it coming from? And then we'd spot a couple of people, then we saw more people, and they were spread out over quite a distance. And at that point we realized that the boat had obviously flipped over and people had got tossed. We had no idea how many people were out there, and at that point we started, the guys were jumping into the water, the rescue swimmers, rescue divers, and we were all at that point having to help pull people up. It was cold, it was January. People are wearing multiple layers of clothes, so they're obviously weighed down. The life jackets were useless. A lot of them were fake life jackets. So a lot of the migrants were buying life jackets, were often just stuffed with a bit of styrofoam, and it actually would weigh them down more than save them. And I remember pulling this one woman aboard who was pregnant. There was myself, and there was a Sky News TV team were with us, and we all just put the cameras down, and the correspondent was helping. We were just trying to pull people in. I remember one woman, she had a kid close to her chest, and I was trying to pull her up, or trying to pull the kid up, and I was like, wow, this kid weighs a ton. I called one of the other guys, help me try and get this child up first, and realized the mother had tied the child with a piece of string to her. And so the rescue swimmer jumped in, he was able to cut it, we pulled the kid up. But there was two other children came up and realized those children were already dead. And a third child came up. So 3 children ended up dying in this tragedy. There was 23 people on the boat. And that was just, I think that's definitely the most difficult thing I've ever witnessed, because the mother didn't realize the children were dead, and we took them inside the boat. The doctor on board was trying to revive them, but they had probably, either whether hypothermia or whether it was drowning, that these three little babies basically had died. And I remember when we were lifting them onto the boat, they put them on the deck and sort of covered them up, and we brought the two mothers out, and it was just, I think it was one of the most awful things I've ever seen in my life, is to see a mother with two of her, her two children. One mother lost two children, and I don't think that is anything that will ever leave me. It's just, as photographers, we're supposed to say, well, we've got to stay distance and stuff. You can't. You're a human being, and I think if you lose your humanity as a photographer, then your pictures will fail, I think.
You made a decision to start making portraits of the people once they'd got aboard the mothership, if we can call it that, which I thought was interesting, because you've got people that have just come aboard. They're cold, they're frightened, they're disorientated. Yet you were making portraits. Yeah,
the portraits sort of came about because I wanted to try and individualize people. What was happening was I was creating images with a lot of people in there, and there's a lot of things happening, and I really wanted people to get a sense of them as individuals, as regular people, and to make the portraits was really difficult, because every square meter of the boat had either some sort of bit of technical equipment on there or whatever. But I had a little bit of wall. It was about, I would say it was about, 3.5 feet wide. It was a white wall. And I could basically squeeze between a couple of pipes, put my camera between the pipes and get someone to stand against the wall. And at first I just often did it with the kids, because I felt they needed to be distracted. It was really harrowing. These kids have been through so much, not just from being on the boat for many, many hours, but also what they've gone through on the Libyan side, which was just horrific. And so it was a fun way of sort of distracting them. And then I found that other people wanted to have their pictures taken, and I think people really got the sense of they really like someone taking an interest in them. I think from all what they'd gone through, crossing through the desert or whatever they'd come through from their home countries, and then being at sea, they've been treated abysmally, and I think they liked the idea that another human being was taking an interest in them as an individual. And I think that as I was making the portraits, more people were coming forward, going, "Yes, I want to do my picture. I want to tell you my story, my name," and I think I did about 150 altogether of them. And unfortunately, they changed the configuration of the boat on one of the later missions, and my little bit of white wall ended up having a big axe pinned to the wall, so I couldn't use it. That was the end of that.
My thanks to Jason Florio this week. And if you go to floriophoto.com, certainly at the time of recording this podcast, Destination Europe is the first tab you'll find on Jason's site, and there are a number of photographs from his time spent on the search and rescue ship and the outboards from 2015 and 2016. There's also a film on his motion menu tab called Fishers of Men, which really explains more about the incredible women and men who saw that helping these people was far more favourable than bemoaning the fact in their eyes that there was, and I suppose it's apt at this time of the year to say, no more room at the inn. That film, by the way, is really for adult eyes only, I'd say. And over on my Breathe Pictures podcast, you can hear a fuller account of Jason's work as a photographer. Some of it harrowing, yes, but also a lighter side. The stories of hope too, and thank you for some of the super suggestions you're throwing our way for photographers you would like to hear on this podcast. I've begun mailing and contacting, so a thankful hands-clasped emoji. How do you spell that word, Kev? To those who put tap to keyboard on that one. Onwards, Kev.
Okay, so back to the questions. This one's from Thomas Wilde, and he says, here's a left field question. I don't think it's been tackled before. Last week I was unfortunate enough to be photographing at a track event at an indoor stadium, and I had 2 lenses lifted from my camera bag as it lay in what I thought was a safe place.
Oh dear.
Now, CCTV threw nothing up, and so I'm left trying to get my money back from the insurance company, who say the bag was neither secure or in view of me. Do I simply lick my wounds and do battle with my bank account? Do you keep going with the insurance company? What do you do to keep your gear safe at the wedding venues you visit?
So I'm so sorry to hear you've lost that kit. God, dear, that's so annoying, isn't it?
It's horrible. And in fact, I'm not going to mention names, but somebody who was returning from the X-Weddings conference had their bag taken on a train, which had camera gear, laptops, everything in it.
The whole bag, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it's desperately sad. Well, the interesting thing I think about this question from Thomas is that the insurance company have made this claim that the bag was neither secure or in view.
Well, yes, the insurance policies do actually state that it has to be somewhere that you can't just leave a bag on the street and expect it to be there 2 seconds later. And effectively, that's what they're saying. You're in a stadium, and if you can't see this bag, then you're not really in control of its security. You've not taken proper, diligent steps to make sure that it's safe. That's what they're saying, isn't it?
Well, of course, and insurance companies will do their level best to not pay up. But where do you draw a line on that? I mean, Thomas doesn't actually say where in the stadium. Neither secure or in view of me. You can't possibly expect a photographer to have the camera bag secure and in view of them, especially like at weddings or racing.
See, weddings are the hardest place to really keep because if you carry a lot of gear, sooner or later you're gonna have to put that. You can't lug that bag around all day long.
In your eyesight all the time.
Wasn't it a friend of yours? Oh, and I'm trying to remember his name. Super photographer. We'd love to have him as an interview on the show. It once appeared at the Jeff Askoff thing because Busink couldn't turn up because there was the Icelandic thing.
Oh, Edmund Terakopian.
Edmund Terakopian, that was it. He actually talks about how he practically sort of straps things to lampposts and double locks them and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's very different if you're working in the streets, absolutely, and he's a jobbing photojournalist. Yeah. Things like this, it's a troublesome thought, isn't it? Because I'm probably a little bit lax at weddings. I typically,
I know I am.
I typically look at I do consciously think about the environment, and I do think, everybody here is here for the right reason and stuff. And generally, I will stick my bag in. I'll say to the wedding planner or organizer, is there somewhere I can put my bag? And usually there's a cupboard, or it's on inside the kitchen or something like that. But then what happens if somebody in the kitchen steals it, or what happens if so
you never know who's there.
No.
I mean, I got into a habit of thinking, right, okay, we're in the warmth of a lovely barn environment here. I could probably stick it in the corner over there near the pushchairs that have just been shoved in the corner. It's lovely here. They're all here for each other. Nothing's going to go on, but it could. And in fact, it did for an assistant of mine not so long ago in London at a really lovely plush venue. She put down she was second shooting, and she put down the cards. I think we might have mentioned this before. And turned to me at one stage and said, "Have you seen my card wallet?" And I said, "No." I was thinking, is it not in the bag? No, I left it there next to the bag. And somebody had come along and thought, "Oh, there's a wallet," I think, and just
because it looked like a purse.
It looked like a purse. I mean, what they did with that wallet afterwards is they probably threw it in a bin when they found out there were memory cards in there. They didn't realise it was actually more important than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There will be some photographers out there that will probably email us and say, "Well, I take a penny case and it's totally padlocked, and I padlock that padlock to the chair, and that padlock the chair is then padlocked to the table, and the table is padlocked to me, and I'm padlocked to my camera."
Yes. And the left bone's connected to.
Yeah, but ultimately, I think. It's tough, isn't that? You just hope it never happens, of course. And I think for I'm trying to get my head around this not in view of me thing. You can't at a wedding. You can't, simple as that. And I know lots of people have made claims from weddings, so I'm hoping that the insurance companies would be pretty lenient in that respect.
Yeah.
A sports venue, very different, I would imagine, because you're probably looking at 20,000-30,000 people there rather than people at a wedding. Certainly, if you're doing street photography and stuff like that, I never leave my bag. Sometimes, even if I'm having a coffee in London and I've got a substantial amount of kit in my camera bag, I'll put the bag under my chair, but I'll wrap the strap around my foot. So if anybody does try and snatch the bag, I'll go with it.
They'll throw you away, keep the equipment.
It'd be quite comical as my cafe latte goes flying up in the air in slow motion.
A little mention here for what sounds like advertise. We've advertised. What did we do? We did Virgin,
Google.
and we did Google. Think Tank camera bags. I use Think Tank, and they all come. Well, the ones I've got anyway. I'm assuming that they all come with this. Have got these wire. It's sort of plumbed into the whole bag. You can't remove this wire, and it's one of those ones you can't cut really easily unless you're carrying around wire cutters.
I think they're called Kensington locks, aren't they? Kensington cables. I think so.
And so these cables, they're attached to these bags, and I use those all the time now. And I use them actually since I had that issue in London with the assistant who had her car wallet stolen. So
I often find my bag gets moved by the planners or the vendors or the people who are moving the tables around or whatever, and I'm like,
don't you hate that when you leave the lid slightly open because you think, well, I'm going to go back to that in a second, and somebody's moved it, and because I haven't realised that the lid's not zipped up, everything's fallen out.
But touch wood, it won't happen to you again, Thomas, for a start, and nobody else.
Nick Leach, thank you for your question. Hey, Kevin Neal, I fell in love with the original X100, now have the X100F and the XT3. I know, Kev, you said you take raw stroke colour images and then convert to black and white. I find this difficult, so I think I take pictures in colour, different pictures in colour rather, than I do in black and white. No, generally I always shoot black and white. Do you look for different things when taking the picture, knowing you'll make it a black and white image? Would love to have come to the conference in Bath, but from Sydney the commute is terrible. Love your work, Nick Leach, Sydney, Australia. So do you look for different things, Kev, when taking the picture, knowing you're going to make it a black and white image? You see, the whole thing was, when you look through that EVF, it's black and white, isn't it?
Yeah, but then, it depends what style you're shooting. If I was a landscape photographer, I probably wouldn't do that. Or if I was shooting, I don't know, flowers or perhaps even portraits, but I think for the type of images that I produce, there's a lot. I depend on the light and shadow stuff. So yeah, it's not one model fits all for sure. No. I just find it helps me a lot when I'm looking for the light and the shadows.
Okay, right. Your question, Kev.
Quite an interesting question, really, from Paul Wright, and he says, "Hi guys, I don't think this topic has been."
My question wasn't interesting. Is that what it was?
It was. No. But this has a wedding tinge to it.
Well,
but actually,
I thought you were suggesting mine was.
Don't be rude.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think this topic has been discussed on previous shows, so would like to get your views, please. I shot a wedding for the first time for a friend last year, and it was only during the editing phase that I noticed how much facial detail I was getting close up, even on an XT1. With this in mind, and for subjects of a more mature age, i.e. me and you, Neil, this detail can really lead, and he's paraphrasing here, to blemishes being somewhat highlighted.
Oh.
So, I've been using Tiffin's Black Pro Mist and Black Satin filters, and he puts in brackets to help us out. I'm sure other manufacturers provide something similar. That can soften them and give them more film-like look. I was wondering how, if you worry about this topic, either during the event or using filters, or perhaps during post-processing. Yeah. Now, I'm presuming those filters are screw-on filters, softening filters, right?
Yeah, I think so. Or you drop them into the little Tiffin holder that
rather than a software filter, like an Instagram filter.
Yeah.
Well, yes, there's absolutely, for portraits and close-up stuff like that, it's true that the higher the resolution of the camera, the more detail and definition you're going to see. And that's why, like on 4K TVs, all of the presenters hated 4K TVs, didn't they? Because it showed off all this.
Well, HD does the same thing, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I don't do anything about it particularly, but then I rarely get that close. I very occasionally, because I had quite a bit of contrast in my images, but very occasionally I look at an image and I think, that looks a little bit too much. So I will sometimes reverse the clarity slider just to make it softer.
Do you?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't use I'm not putting any filters or anything like that at the time of shooting. It's just totally in post-processing.
Do you bung a load of grain in to help soften an image?
No, I just use that reverse clarity.
Right, okay.
But
do you ever put grain in?
No, not really. Because I use available light, so a lot of my images are quite high ISO anyway, so the grain is natural.
Yeah.
So I don't typically add grain to images.
That sort of covers a question Tim Bender was had sent in. So, Tim, there's the answer for the grain question that you sent in a couple of weeks or months ago.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right.
So there you go, clarity. The filters and stuff. No, I don't. I wouldn't spend time doing that. Software, yes.
Shenny Huimont from Massachusetts. Just started listening to the podcast a couple of weeks ago. Love it. Very motivational. Awesome. Awesome? Did you just use awesome? All right, we'll let you off. So I currently own an XT2 that I use for street travel and personal stuff, and for weddings I use my Nikon system. I've been wanting to jump over to the Fuji system, but I've been having a bit of a tough time with autofocus. Any tips on how to use the AF? I know it works differently in each camera, but I was wondering if you could shine some light on what you do. How do you approach it? What kind of settings do you use? Also, I heard that the XT3 autofocus is better than that on the XT2. That's true. Do you feel, though, it's a big difference?
Yeah.
In a word.
Yeah.
There we go. Next question.
So the rest of that question, yes, the autofocus.
Some tips really on autofocus.
Well, I'm currently using XT2. Was that they were currently using XT2?
Yeah.
Yes. So I would strongly consider looking at back button focusing using the AF lock button rather than the top button, the standard shutter button. That speeds things up. You can also check your the release priority in the menu.
This came up, funnily enough, in the Facebook group, didn't it?
I think it's
somebody was having difficulties with.
Yeah, focus.
Yeah.
So I would always set for single shot, for AFS, I would set my release priority to focus. And for AFC, I would set it to release. So essentially, you're insisting the camera won't take a picture until it's locked focus in single shot, whereas in continuous, its priority is more about kind of making sure that the pictures are taken, rather than if you're doing a burst of 15 pictures, it's not going to stop every single.
Does that mean you
image.
might get a load that are out of focus?
No, you will more than likely have a little bit of hesitation at the beginning while it grabs focus.
Yeah.
If it's a subject it can grab focus on.
Yeah.
Other than that, it'll be fine. So that kind of stuff. Look at the back button focusing. If you do use continuous focus, obviously have a look at the different continuous focus. I don't know what they call them. Presets, parameters. You can have one set up for kind of fast-moving subjects that are appearing in the frame quickly. All that kind of stuff. Just experiment, I guess. But back button focusing is usually the answer to most people's woes.
Thank you for your question. Do you have one more? I think we've got time for one more, and then I want to talk about the number 52.
Hi, Kevin and Neil. This is from Marius Peter. I think we spoke to Marius before, haven't we?
Yeah, I think so. You're very welcome. You can send in more than one.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. As you know, here in the US, documentary wedding photography doesn't have such a big market as it does in the EU and UK. So he's separating out the EU and UK now.
Oh no, don't do that. We've not gone yet.
He did put a joke in brackets. Bless him. I
got rid of the Brexit means Brexit jingle.
Yeah, because we don't know. That's why. Now I want to start doing weddings again, but I really want to approach the documentary style. People here don't really want or even understand that style. My dilemma here is, how do I defend myself in front of these couples when I propose this style? What arguments besides real and pure memory should I give? How should we, the US, educate the clients here? Thank you, Kutgwa. Oh, Kutgw.
Kutgwa?
What do you think that stands for? Kutgw.
I've no idea.
Keep up the good work.
Oh, very good.
Kutgwa.
We will.
Quite like that. So, over to you. Americans. Imagine you've just moved to America. How would you market yourself?
I thought the documentary genre was growing somewhat in America. I thought, but clearly I'm wrong. I thought there was more of an understanding for documentary weddings than there was before.
Well, maybe not. I don't know. I think
as proved by the fact that we seem to see quite a lot of it on Instagram these days from the States, that is.
You know what? I think there's a distinct difference between documentary in inverted commas and documentary not in inverted commas.
Right.
So no, I'm not kind of saying that this is true for everybody, and I know there are lots of very good authentic documentary wedding photographers in the States.
Yeah.
But there is definitely a lot also that stage it, and natural natural, candid documentary wedding photography. So the client comes, we'll do, we'll set up all of these shots to make you look like you're laughing and having a great time, etc. And it's just staged. And perhaps the message in America is that that's the best way to do it, and perhaps it is. I don't know. Who am I to say it's not? But I think that there is a little bit of a mixed message there in that. But also you have to remember, in America, a vast majority of America has beautiful either oceans or mountains or scenery. They've got space, they've got all of that kind of stuff. And so traditionally their weddings will be based around the environment and the land around them. So if you choose to get married in on a Californian beach, you're unlikely to want a documentary photographer to just photograph that, because you've specifically chosen to go to a beautiful part of the world for the beach, for the mountains, for whatever. So you probably do want more classical style portraits, etc., and rightly so.
And the format's slightly different as well. I mean, for example, in the States, you have a first glimpse thing, which is an exceptionally contrived moment. Again, it's not a right or wrong in that, but it is, isn't it?
Glimpse? Do they call it? Look, I think they call it look.
First look. Sorry, first glimpse.
That's.
Can I just see you round the corner? No, that's not you. That's your grandma. Yeah. No, sorry, I meant first look, first glimpse.
Yeah, they do, and but the thing is, I know people who do that. They allow that to happen, the first glimpse, but they photograph it documentary style, rather than set it up.
Can you? Because the whole thing's.
Well, no, they can carry on doing their first look or first glimpse.
First glimpse.
You can photograph around the stuff that happens around it without direction. As long as you're not directing that moment, then it's, in my mind, it's documentary anyway.
I think there might also be something about. Look, I have said in the past, when people sit in front of me and said, we don't like our photos being taken, I can't think of anything worse, we're going to stand up in lines for forever. And I think maybe there's something quite British about that, in that we're not used to going for our Thanksgiving portraits every year. Yeah. And that we tend to look back at portraiture and contrived or set up shots as that kind of thing with, oh no, because I like schools when they used to make me do that at school. Whereas I think the American market, it occurs to me, a slightly more open-minded, it seems, when it comes to those portrait moments.
Look, the thing is, in America, how many people in the UK? 60 million?
65, isn't it?
Something like that, 65 million. How many people in the United States? And I do not know the answer to this.
400 gazillion.
Yes, there's a lot more, put it that way. So there are bound to be people who want this style. It's just a case of finding them, and that comes down to marketing. And as brutal as it sounds, it comes down to being honest with your marketing. And if you genuinely want to shoot in a documentary style, you have to shoot in a documentary style, and you have to only show that on your website. And when those clients turn up to your studio and say, we really like your pictures, but actually we want 2 hours of group shots down on the beach and all that kind of stuff, you have to basically say, well,
it's not what I do.
No, I'm not going to do that. And it's fine to obviously to say, okay, we'll do a couple up at the house or whatever. But because then you just become exactly the same as all the others, and what you're trying to do is differentiate. And if you don't have the the willpower to do that, then you never will, and you'll end up just doing the same as everybody else, which may well be perfectly good and acceptable for you, but
education. Yes. Education. Right, 52. We now have worked out, I think, when that 52nd, that year anniversary is coming around. And we've worked out that it's Monday the 17th of February.
That will be our 1 year anniversary episode.
Yes.
Oh, isn't that sweet? Near Valentine's Day as well.
It's very near Valentine's Day. It seems very appropriate.
Yeah.
So we've got to do something special. We are doing a special Christmas edition, which is our nativity play coming up in a few weeks' time. But for this one, for number 52, we because we're still in negotiations with where the brilliant place that we think we're going to put it. So are we going to loosely suggest a couple of things so people can start to think about 3 weeks and stuff, yeah?
Not a whole week.
No, not a whole week.
Just a couple of hours, guys.
A couple of hours. So we were looking at either... It's got to be a Saturday, hasn't it? So maybe the 1st of Feb as the record day. Saturday, 1st of Feb. What do you think?
Well, Six Nations starts that weekend.
Oh, we can't be the first. No. So it'll have to be during the week then.
Well, Neil and I will firm up a little bit more on the dates.
Maybe we should do that bit on air. But we are looking about doing something about a week or two before, aren't we?
Yeah, a week or two before. We'll figure something out. We'll do a live podcast recording.
Most likely to be in London. That's important.
Yes, will I think fair to say definitely be in London.
Sorry for all those that say it should be in Newcastle, Manchester, Ayr, Dundee, Plymouth, and Indiana. This one can't be.
No.
Other ones maybe.
Correct. And we'll do something. We'll do a live podcast, and we'll have a bit of a bash and a little bit of a celebration with our friends and thank yous. Yeah. We can give you lots of thank yous then in real life.
So we're planning. So start to put some time aside in your diary. We'll firm up with a proper date. Yeah? I'm sorry I threw sort of Saturday at you, thinking I didn't realise it was the start of the.
I think actually I might have a wedding that day as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well. All right. Thank you to this week's guest. It's nothing if not planned sometimes, is it?
Well organised.
Jason Florio, and you can hear the full cast recording on the Breathe Pictures website and podcast. If you've liked this week's show, please take a moment, share it, and we'll consider you legendary material. Apple Podcast reviews, there's some cracking ones coming in. Thank you very, very much. If you haven't joined the private Facebook group, now is the time. We're waiting in there to say hello. And thank you for your questions, because as 65 people are about to say, they're the lifeblood of the show. It all grinds to a stop if you don't furnish us with those burning questions your partners get bored with hearing of a weekend. Send them in via the website address to click@fujicast.co.uk. Music is from Blue Wednesday, and it's the lead up to Christmas. I mean, we're officially now in December, so all the television adverts have got cute kids, haven't they? So we thought we should have the cute kids returning with the payoffs here. So here's Kev's.
Kevin and Neil have their own websites, but I thought it would be easier to give you one website address with all the links you could possibly ever need. www.fujicast.co.uk/the boys.
Sorry, force of habit. Whoops. Yes, we thought one link from now on is all you need. That page will show you to all our sites. Plus, also, we're going to build for those that have asked a book club soon. So, see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production. Email the show with your questions and words of wisdom to click@fujicast.co.uk. Email any complaints and political nonsense to our wives, who will deal with your comments in their own good time and in their own good way.